Right, hello and welcome. Thank you very much for registering for our webinar panel discussion hosted by world leader in building analytics software, CIM. Chair for the next 60 minutes, my name is Jim McClelland. I'm founder and editor of SustMeme, home to both the magazine and the weekly bulletin. Building on the success of previous sessions, our deep dive today, as you'll see from the screen slide, is reducing operational carbon with NABERS. So to take us through the topic, we have a wealth of built environment experience and breadth of perspectives on our panel today. So by way of introductions, we have Karl Welsch, Technical Officer at NABERS, Joe Hawkins, Director of Asset Management Operations at Pembroke. We have Dr. Claire Bhaumik, who's partner at Inkling LLP and a member of the NABERS UK Independent Design Review Panel, and Scott Beauman, Head of Customer Success at CIM. The format for our session today differs slightly from previous. As you'll see, we have, to begin with, we have an intro from Karl to NABERS with a few slides. We then have the panel discussion with questions from the chair, also from yourselves, and a case study then from on NABERS improvement from Scott, plus final Q&A to close. So that's the order of things for today. And I would just like to remind the audience, if you do have questions for the panel, please pop them in the box at the bottom of your screen. Keep typing your queries in throughout the session and we'll try to get to them during both the debate in the middle and the final Q&A. Once the webinar concludes, kindly take a moment to complete the very short feedback survey that you get. It's ever so useful for the organisers to understand, especially what you liked and what else they could be doing. And so that's the order of things. Are you ready now? It's enough from me. Let the show begin, as they say. So to kick us off, Karl, I wonder if I could ask you please to provide us with a brief intro to NABERS with the help of a few explainer slides. Karl, over to you.
Thanks, Jim. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight on the panel. And I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you today about NABERS. The program just celebrated 25 years of operation in Australia, so we're proud to be part of such a long-standing and successful program. And we're really excited to see the next chapter of NABERS in the UK under the administration of CIBC. So today I'll give a quick overview of the NABERS program in Australia, how the tool works, some examples of how the program has been successful, and how we've interacted with government policies to drive towards net zero. So NABERS rating is a 6-star rating tool for buildings with 3-star as the market average, 6-star is the market leader, and 1-star is by no means a fail. It's an indication that there's work to be done and the journey has just begun. So as we say, the NABERS rating measures impact, not intent. So the tool uses 12 months of operational data to determine performance, and it accounts for floor area, hours of operation, and location, so that you can fairly compare offices of different sizes in different climate zones to each other. The tools are robust as they use actual consumption data from a 12-month rating period. They're technology neutral, and our benchmarking process, as I mentioned, allows buildings to fairly compare themselves to others, regardless of size, location, or operation. Our 5 rating tools that we have operating in Australia at the moment: energy, water, waste, and carbon neutral, all measuring the impact a building has on the environment, and the indoor environment tool, which measures the impact that a building has on its occupants. So not shown in this lineup as yet, but we recently announced the launch of our embodied carbon tool. So the building sectors that we have tools for at the moment in Australia are shown on the screen, and we're currently working on an energy tool for retail stores and an energy and water tool for schools. So how a NABERS energy rating works is we've got on the left of the screen here our NABERS accredited assessor who is engaged by the building owner to conduct the rating. And a list of NABERS accredited assessors can be found on the CIBC website. The assessor starts by collecting information about the building, such as location, occupancy, floor area, hours of operation, and energy consumption. All data must be verified. For example, consumption data must come from utility bills or validated submeters in the case of exclusions. We also have standard surveying methods that are required for floor area. So the assessor conducts a site visit to confirm that everything matches what the paperwork says, and the rating is lodged with NABERS. An audit is done on the rating on the way in, and confirm and make sure that the rating conforms with the rules, which are also available on the CIBSE website. So the algorithm in the center box there compares the building details with the actual consumption data from the bills, does its magic and provides a star rating and a rating report over on the right side of the slide. So the certificate and the report are issued to the assessor and the building owner in that green feedback loop at the bottom there. So some portfolios may have an in-house sustainability team and they might take action based on that report, or the assessors themselves may provide a service to propose improvements to reduce consumption and lift the star rating. So another of our favorite sayings around here is what gets measured gets managed. And if it can be managed, it can be improved. So with a baseline rating to show you where your building is currently performing, you can then direct budget towards capital works or operational programs to target energy efficiency. And this might be the start of your journey, or you might be well on the way. So a great example of a long-term journey for a large office building in Australia is Australia Square, which is right in the middle of the Sydney CBD. Their journey started over on the left there in 2005 with a 0-star rating, and 15 years later have reached 5 stars. So by measuring their performance each year and keeping a focus on energy efficiency, they're able to identify and address inefficiencies. So the message here is that the annual NABERS rating creates this constant cycle of measurement, management and improvement, and can take a below average performing building on a journey to superior performance. And of course, improvements in the star rating also translates to improvement in operational costs. And we can see the energy intensity dropping as the star rating increases. So that's one building's journey, but I'm going to zoom out to the journey of the whole office sector in Australia. And here's the average energy savings across all office buildings, starting at a baseline energy use in the year that they achieved their first energy rating. So our data shows that the energy use decreases year on year over subsequent ratings. And 33% energy savings in a decade is pretty significant for the whole office sector. But what drives buildings to get NABERS ratings year on year? For many, it's because it's mandatory to get a NABERS rating at the point of sale or lease. But for many, it's through ESG reporting obligations. And in Australia, a NABERS rating achieves these reporting requirements either on its own or by interacting with other sustainability programs. And we work closely with the team at GRESB and with the Green Building Council of Australia to make sure our tools are aligned. So this is the journey of a sector with mandatory ratings. And we can compare that in a sector where ratings are voluntary, like shopping centres. So, and here the progress is almost identical, if not a little faster. So the two key messages in this slide are that whether mandated or voluntary, significant savings can be achieved in any building sector. And secondly, our favourite, of course, what gets measured gets managed. And I'd like to finish on a slide that shows the uptake of NABERS rating in the Australian office sector and the influence that government policy has had on this uptake. So the first federal policy that had a significant effect in 2005 was to legislate a minimum NABERS star rating for any government-owned or leased office space. Building owners saw the benefit in attracting government tenants, and this policy continues to be a key piece in the government's net zero strategy. Later, we see the huge effect that the Building Energy Efficiency Act had when all office buildings over 2,000 square metres were required to get a NABERS rating. There's no targets in this act. The only requirement is to get a rating and display it on at the point of sale or lease. So later the program expanded by reducing the eligible floor area to 1,000 square metres, and a significant number of new buildings joined the program. So the point of this slide is to show that NABERS is a very effective tool to be used in policy, whether it's government policy, as I just mentioned, or private policy. So that's a brief introduction to NABERS, Jim, and its uptake in Australia. We're again excited to have CIBSE as the administrator for NABERS UK, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my fellow panelists about where the program can go from here. So back to you, Jim.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Karl. So that's really nice orientation for everybody there, and a reminder and some examples. Star rating impact, not intent. Good to hear about some developments in the pipeline, such as the embodied carbon tool, and I think we'll perhaps discuss some of those later with you as well. And fundamentally, it's measurement, management, and improvement. So there we are. That's the that's the context for what we're talking about today. So now in terms of a few questions, let's dig a little deeper. So first off, I'd like to discuss really why NABERS is important and effectively where you start. So Joe, if I'm coming to you first, please. So with asset management experience in Australia, including managing portfolios with NABERS rated assets, what have you found to be the key benefits, especially from the perspective of an owner? Benefits, Joe, please.
Great, thanks, Jim. Personally, I think there are lots of benefits, but in the interest of time, I'm going to share my top 3. So I was going to start with one of my favourite quotes, but Karl, you have already used it several times. So what gets measured gets managed. I use this quote regularly, frequently. I always explain I first read it on the NABERS website, but I really truly believe this statement is true. And I think the statistics that Karl shared certainly support this. So having a consistent benchmark is critical, and as is the need for it to be regularly updated. So NABERS ratings are valid for 12 months. There is ongoing focus reviewing energy consumption throughout the year, continuously monitoring to see how additional efficiencies can be gained to secure that next half star. And I think that ongoing focus and the regular need to re-rate the buildings is a critical part of that. And the results are less energy being used. So, you know, a real reduction that you can see. I think the second benefit is the leasing impact. So one benefit of achieving the next half star is to become more appealing to prospective tenants. Many of them have set many minimum standards for NABERS energy ratings when selecting their new premises. And a little bit like a hotel star rating system, no one wants to stay in a 2 or 3 star hotel. No corporate occupier wanted to stay in a 3-star building once those ratings were published. Mm-hmm. And I think here government backing was critical. So not only from a legislative perspective, where NABERS ratings were required for leasing and sale of office space, but also from an occupier perspective, with both federal and state government departments in Australia initially requiring a minimum 4.5-star NABERS energy rating. And I believe that since from 1st of July next year, the minimum rating for a government lease is going to be increasing to 5.5 stars. So they're really leading from the front and kind of making sure that their own space meets those requirements. And last, but by no means least, is my third reason, which is, of course, the actual cost reduction in energy costs. So because we are now using less energy, we are hopefully paying less for that. Now, that may have been partially offset with some recent substantial increases in energy costs, but I think tenants and landlords are both certainly making direct savings from those improved energy efficiency being achieved in their buildings, and we shouldn't ignore that. And I think the NABERS website currently reports an estimated 1.7 billion Australian dollars in energy savings for the rated buildings. Thanks, Jim.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Really nice top 3 there. So benchmark, crucially continuously updated, regularly updated, leasing impact, and of course cost savings stemming from the energy reduction. So some really nice points there. So Claire, if I was to come to you next then. So obviously NABERS is arriving in the UK. So what is the gap that you think NABERS will help fill here in the UK, please, Claire?
I think historically in the UK, we've been very, very good at design stage compliance with regulations and various schemes such as BREEAM, but we've not been so good at following through to the operational stage and making sure that buildings actually perform as they're designed to perform. So hence we have a performance gap. So that is one gap which has been around for a while, and it's something that NABERS really can help to address, because NABERS is based on the independent assessment of the in-use energy. So how much energy the building actually uses. It's not a theoretical exercise at all. It's measured on the ground using meter readings. And NABERS design for performance for design stage buildings or major refurbishments also considers building management at the design stage, which has been missing really from traditional building process and the existing compliance type of schemes. So, for example, requirements for tenants' fit-out designs are discussed at the design stage, and the requirement for these to be reviewed by the design team to see how these will impact the energy use of the building once it's in use. And also, the NABERS design for performance covers contractual requirements, for example, contractual requirements for the facilities manager to deliver the rating. So additionally, on the building simulation side, we have a bit of a skills gap in this country in terms of detailed building modelling and systems modelling to accurately represent the building rather than using a more simplified approach. Because the traditionally the drivers for example, Part L design stage modelling have been very simplified model, which doesn't really represent the controls or the HVAC systems, the heating, cooling and ventilation systems really in any detail at all. Now there's a driver for these things that building modelers are upskilling, and they're starting to do these kinds of modelling. And this enables the building to be tested in the sandbox of the model and the controls, and to fine-tune the systems before it gets built, so they're more likely to actually perform and issues are ironed out before the building is actually constructed. And then finally, NABERS is a team effort. And having a performance target from design for performance, or even for an in-use building, and for an independent review for a design stage or upgraded building is something that facilitates communication between the design team, between the different disciplines, which is, it can only be a good thing.
Excellent. So very nice points there. So crucially, of course, bridging that performance gap, instead of just handing over the keys and all responsibility post design stage, it's that operational and in use, essentially independent assessment as well, which is important. Nice point about the skills gap as well. And I think especially in the performance side, I think some of the challenges were exposed, particularly during and post COVID, with fluctuating occupancy rates, etc., where it was clear that the performance in use for some buildings was either not well understood or not well aligned with the expectations. And then a nice point at the end about team effort. So I don't know what the gap would be for that, but the collaboration gap or something in the end. So a nice point about it being a team game. So then, Scott, let's come to you now. So we understand what it could and should do, but I was going to ask you really, what challenges do owners or managers generally face when they actually start preparing for a rating? So when they get down to it, what are the challenges they face, Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Look, great question. I think I spent a lot of my kind of recent career talking with owners and operators about NABERS ratings and things like that. There's a couple of kind of key challenges, I suppose, that I've seen sort of float to the top, certainly recently. I think probably starting, at the top, we said it a couple of times and already, impact, not intent. And I think we'll probably say it a couple more times before this webinar is out. But the data collection piece, I find something that quite a few kind of building owners sort of challenge with, right? The data comes from a number of different sources. As Karl mentioned, you need to kind of get various different teams and that kind of coordination across your supply chain, right? You're bringing in bills, you're bringing in leasing information and floor areas and rated hours and occupancy times and things like that, as well as submitted data where that exists for exclusion. So there's quite a few different sort of sets of teams that need to get involved and need to be coordinated and kind of managed, I guess, at the time of the rating, right? As Joe mentioned, that kind of ongoing efficiency drive as well is another kind of challenge, right? This is not something that you can just set and forget for the next 5 years, right? You're really only as good as your last 12 months, right? So staying on top of it, getting the visibility as to how your building is performing and has been performing, right? Because ultimately what we see a lot of as well is a bit of anxiety, I suppose, from building owners and operators in particular, right? Will I still rate as highly as I did last year? Is my data all there, right? Am I gonna not have the data I need when it comes time to the rating? So look, for me, those are probably the three top sort of challenges that we sort of see with the partners that we have.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Scott. So yeah, important where I'm sure we'll come back to the data again, and also the coordination of teams and that ongoing efficiency drive piece, which, as you say, working over time with teams, with fluctuating scenarios, different partnerships, perhaps, and a nice point about that hint of anxiety. You know, it's not exactly TripAdvisor for buildings, but there is a bit of anxiety. It is a rating, it is scoring, you know, and so there is that element for managers and owners as well to face when they actually get down to it. So nice points there. So if we're then zooming in a little bit, and to really look at the operational efficiency, I think I've got a few questions I'd like to drill down now. So coming to you to kick off again, Joe, please. So in your experience, what would you say are some of the measures implemented by your operations or FM teams that have proved the most effective at lifting the energy efficiency of your assets? So top tips is really what we're looking for here, Joe. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jim. So I think globally, we're finding different strategies have been effective for different assets, different regions, sometimes in combination. Often this will include some element of equipment upgrades or digital optimization platforms, but also diligent manual monitoring. We really rely on the expertise of the people on site running the buildings. And we find the best outcome depends on the context. One approach doesn't fit all. We can't do one thing in one building and expect the same results if we roll it out everywhere. However, our assets are all at various stages of evaluating and implementing strategies to improve energy efficiency. And some examples of measures that have been implemented in some of our buildings so far include the replacement of fluorescent lighting with energy efficient LED lighting. I think that's a really obvious one. Lots of people are doing it, and it does have a big impact. Also upgrading lighting control systems, which include occupancy sensors, and also really thoughtful end of life replacement of plant with more efficient models. So that's chillers and boilers and things. So they're my top three.
Excellent, thank you very much. So three good tips there: lighting, always, controls, and a nice point for end of life as well, because there is not just the upgrade scenario, but there is also that circular economy aspect to things there. And Scott, then if I were to come to you next, you've I mean, you work with countless clients and buildings to improve their sustainability performance, the NABERS Energy ratings in Australia. What have you found to be the most successful operational measures?
Yeah, good question. I think for us, and from what I see, right, I'm a firm believer in making the most of kind of what you have, right? So I understand that there's kind of two ways of really kind of driving those efficiencies in building, and one is and what I'm going to talk about now is that first one, right? Working with what you've got, right? So you know, getting visibility on how things are running, right? You know, what times of day is my main plant starting? You know, what time are my air handling units coming on? What time are they running on the weekends? Right. So look, installing basically an operational technology, I suppose, to give you some visibility on those different sets of systems, right? How confident are you that you are doing the basics, right? You know, before we, you know, get to the second stage of going down the capital works and the upgrades, right? You basically dot your I's and cross your T's, kind of, in my view, right? So from that, once you can kind of get a good sense that yes, I'm really doing the most with what I have, then you can kind of progress to that stage, I guess. So you know, I'm going to say it again, right? Understanding where you are now. Setting those kinds of targets, making sure that's communicated, you know, across your supply chain, and that everyone knows, you know, right from the top down, you know, the ESG teams, the asset and the property manager teams, all the way through down to your FMs and your facility managers and your service contractors on the ground, right? I think communicating those targets clearly, understanding where you are, and then working with what you have basically to optimize the building, right? Comparing yourself to best practice. Are my control strategies as efficient as they can be? If they're not, what do I need to be doing to kind of bring them up to scratch?
Excellent, thanks. So yeah, as you say, it's very much a case of working with what you've got. Nice point about the fact that any kind of journey you're on, you need to know where you're starting from on the map, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and that comparative thing. You know, it is benchmarking, and you do need to see your performance in context of others, and potentially rivals. So now, Karl, I'm coming to you, and the good news is not only am I going to ask you a similar question, but then we have one from the audience to follow as well. So you've got a double whammy here, Karl. So first up, kind of same question to you. Obviously, Scott covered a good number of the points there, but what else might you add around practical measures to address the criteria within NABERS?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think I'll also talk about communication as being key, and also data. But communication with respect to building owners, facilities managers, and tenants, it comes up often about accessing data, but the key to success, as our assessors tell us, is just that constant communication with all stakeholders involved. So having tenants open to sharing information, which can always be kept private, but being in constant communication with the tenants, and so that the first time there's a request for data, it's not the first conversation that's been had about sustainability. The second point about data would be access to data and the availability of data. So BMS data being available and having information required for the to help with the NABERS energy rating, access to metering, to bills, and sub-metering as well. Sub-metering can be very useful for excluding those areas, and so access to sub-metering and being able to validate those sub-meters.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm delighted you mentioned communication, because the maxim that several of you have already name-checked does mean we have a slight variation or an addition. So we say to manage it, first you have to measure it. And then, of course, we say, and then you have to message it. So that's our little add-on, that you have to communicate. That might be internally or externally, but in a lot of cases, it's that communication piece that gets people engaged and also helps present your achievements and findings to the wider world. So then we have a question here coming in from, I think, JP Johnson then, Karl. Just a quick one for you, clarification before we move on. Is the NABERS star rating a sliding scale or an absolute scale? And they say, presumably, the average 3-star performance of buildings can improve over time. So is it a sliding scale or absolute, and can it improve over time?
So I guess the wording that that we use is that it's a fixed benchmark, and so even though the average of the star rating is moving up over time, that's a fixed benchmark. So buildings can be compared back in time favourably. I hope that answers the question there.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, so there we go. And keep the questions coming. If you put them in the bottom, we'll try and feed them in as we go along and pick some up in the closing section as well. So if we're moving then forward a little bit, this is the last round of questions from me. So and we're bang on time, I'm happy to say. So I'm going to have a little look at how things are going to progress up to a point. We're looking ahead now. So Joe, and I also have another question for you to follow as well that's come in particularly for you. So again, you've got double trouble, if you like. So the first question, Joe, how does the asset or fund management team work together with the operations team to maximise the efficiency of an asset? So how do you actually play that team game, please, Joe?
Yeah, sure. So I think communication really is key, and it has been covered a couple of times now. But as an asset manager, I really see the operations team are the experts on the technical aspects of running a building. I am not a technical expert, but the asset management team can motivate the on-site team to focus on this area or any other area, but to reinforce the importance and to drive ongoing and continuing focus. I think celebrating achievements is really important, but so is expecting more focus and understanding the priorities. So I thought I would share a story from COVID times. Seems a lifetime ago in some respects, but during COVID, there was obviously a focus on indoor air quality. And a lot of work was being done globally to understand how much fresh air could be brought into a building and how various filter specifications could be increased to improve the indoor air quality. But we also recognised that higher filters came with an energy efficiency impact. So effectively, more energy was needed to push the air through a finer filter. More energy was required to filter higher quantities of outside air rather than recirculated air that was already at the desired temperature, for example. However, as COVID concerns reduced, all of our buildings have been able to return to the manufacturer's recommended settings, and we've obviously benefited then from reduced energy usage while maintaining high air quality, because I think we all know more about the indoor air quality than perhaps we understood a few years ago. But this is an example where asset managers need to work alongside the operations team to discuss and agree on those priorities, but to understand the impacts of decisions, and then to ensure regular review to reflect changing priorities over time. And I think that regular review of energy consumption data, helped by, for NABERS, a 12-monthly rating cycle, helps retain focus on something that might otherwise slip out of sight and down the long list of priorities that both the asset management team have and the operational team have.
Excellent, thanks. And a nice example there, and a good point about potential trade-offs around air quality, for example, and the need for an understanding of the impact to avoid essentially unintended consequences. And the other question I have for you here, Joe, that's coming is, so when managing a portfolio of assets, what challenges have you faced ensuring visibility and consistency of data, and what advice do you have for overcoming those? So it's a data question for you, Joe, as well, please.
Okay, well, it is a big challenge, and we have a global portfolio, and we are now recording energy use and energy use intensity across all of our portfolio. And that presents challenges because we operate in a number of different regions, and each region and market is set up differently. For example, in some markets, we measure whole building energy use, and in other markets, it's very definitely split between base building and tenancy areas. So your apples to apples comparison gets hard across markets where the markets are set up differently. Different climates require different levels of heating and cooling. Different utility companies bill monthly, quarterly, annually. So I think there are definite challenges in finding a way to consistently report on energy use and energy use intensity. However, fundamentally, the measurement in itself is that starting point. What gets measured gets managed. So although there are challenges in gathering the data, we are certainly seeing benefits at that property level as a result of the data gathering process.
Excellent, thanks. That's nice to hear you set out the challenges nicely, and then a big however in the middle about how we can actually tackle them, which is good to hear. So Claire, if I'm coming to you then in this section. So once NABERS becomes more established in the UK, in your opinion, where do you see it heading in terms of expansion? In other words, what next? Water, indoor environment, maybe other sector classes. So where do you see things going for us, Claire, please?
So NABERS is still a new scheme, and it's a major departure from what we've done before. So I think we're still all learning. So that's something to emphasise, really. So the assessors and the clients, the building owners, the contractors, we're all learning about the NABERS process. So I think one big area where we will get some valuable information is once the buildings that have design reviewed, design for performance ratings at the design stage start to be occupied, and then to have their in-use ratings, this will give us some valuable information which potentially can be used to tweak the scheme to see whether things are working as intended, where buildings are going wrong. It'd be great to learn. It's probably Karl can speak more on this, but it would be great to get some feedback and some case studies at that stage to see what's gone wrong and what's gone right, and to learn from these as we go forward. I think the initial expansion is likely to be for the NABERS Energy scheme to cover additional building types, probably focusing on those already covered in Australia. That would probably be simplest. So, for example, shopping centres, hotels, data centres and schools. But this obviously depends on having suitable UK benchmarks for these types of buildings. So I guess that's another process that needs to go on behind the scenes is the benchmarking and data collection part of the work. After this, I would expect additional rating schemes, like as you mentioned, so in us, following what's already there in Australia. So waste, water, embodied carbon, and indoor environment, for example. Obviously, Karl can speak more about all of these.
Excellent, thank you. Nice. So, and yeah, following up exactly on that then, Karl, please, if I could ask you, and we have quite a few questions coming in, keep popping them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll try and cover them off as promptly as we can. So, Karl, so yeah, I wonder if you could give our audience that a little global perspective about what some of the latest initiatives from NABERS in Australia, and are there plans to expand anywhere else beyond, as well as the UK, for example, Karl?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. The latest initiatives that, and there's a bit going on in Australia. We're about to expand into private and public schools with an energy and water tool. And we've developed a retail stores tool as well. So there's also the embodied carbon tool that I mentioned earlier on, which is the upfront emissions in the construction of the building. And recently we've launched a renewable energy indicator. So in addition to the building sectors where we have a specific tool for, we've developed a tool which is not a full star rating tool, but it is an indicator of energy intensity pretty much per square meter for a range of building types that haven't got that we haven't developed a benchmark for, but there is an indicator so they can get an idea of where they're sitting with energy efficiency. So we've also recently, in the last year, added the energy performance indicator to our ratings. And this is a mechanism where we've separated the building performance from a clear indication of the sources of all the energy. So market mechanisms like surrendering generation certificates, on-site renewable energy generation, as well as the sources of the other electricity and gas, fossil fuels. So, and then turning to international interest, we have had NABERS in New Zealand since 2013 for office buildings. And there's been interest from almost every continent. Our director's been talking with many countries, and we recently had a interest in Germany where we ran a pilot. Yeah, so that continue. We continue to get interest from around the world. So yeah, that's the international interest, Jim.
Excellent, thank you, and good to hear about the energy performance indicator as well, because obviously it's easy to conflate energy and carbon together, but of course energy reduction doesn't always bring carbon reduction, depending on what the sources of that energy use are going forward. So nice point. And then, so I'll just try and pick up a couple of audience questions here as well, and they are from Matt Dickinson, I think. First one maybe to you, Karl, if I could. So this one, it was quite specific, says, I'd like to see the numbers and distribution of ratings for NABERS UK, so the three stars, 4 stars. Are these summarised somewhere to know what to target versus the market, and also which version of NABERS UK? So they're asking really, can they see the numbers, get a feel for kind of what the market's doing, and where they should be pitching their ambitions going forward, really?
Yeah, great question. And without a thorough, I guess, vision of what is happening in the UK, I might first of all direct you to the CIBSE website for any information there. But perhaps I can either follow up with some information on this one, or if anyone else on the panel might have a crack at that one.
Happy to open that up if somebody else has an offering. And also maybe, I don't know if Claire, if you wanted to pick this one up about whether you're aware, does the government have plans to introduce a mandatory operational rating moving forward? So either Claire or
Yes.
Joe or his neighbours filling that gap. So Claire, please. Hand up. Oh, good.
So
Hand up to answer the question. Thank you.
there was a consultation. I can't remember the name of the consultation, but that was some time ago under a different government. So we have had a change of government, so everything's up in the air. But I think there does seem to be a focus on low energy building with this new government. So we're hopeful, we keep pushing for it, and I can't say yes or no, but I'm hopeful.
Nice optimistic note there, and maybe actually, Joe, if I think there is a design question which has specifically has your name in it as well from Matt. So understand how a design leads into maintaining a rating year on year for a building manager. I wonder if you can maybe pick that one up. How investors are planning to maintain the rating and how design fits in. Would that possibly be something you could respond to, Joe or Claire?
Oh, sorry, Jim. I thought that one was for Claire.
It does say Claire in it, actually, yes, but it also says design in it. So I didn't know if on the design review plan or either of you. So Claire or Joe maybe there.
To be honest, I haven't done the kind of at design leads ratings. We were doing the operational ratings. So I don't have an answer apart from the fact that I think even a brand new building or a newly refurbished building that has just been commissioned usually needs some tweaks to that commissioning after a period of time. So I would say whether a building is brand new, refurbished, or has aging plant and machinery, there is as much work that can be done on monitoring, reviewing, and refining. I think to Scott's point before, there's digital methods, there's manual expertise on the ground. But I would say for new and for older buildings, maintaining that rating year on year takes ongoing focus.
Excellent, thank you. Good answer, thank you. And lastly, and then we will move through. You're working good and hard, panel, much appreciated. So Scott, if I come to you, maybe you could pick up this one. There's one about what do you need tenants to do in order to ensure a building achieves a target rating? What provisions are essential to include in leases from experience in Australia or otherwise? So I wonder if you could just mention something about the tenants' involvement.
Yeah, good question. I think there's a couple of bits and pieces that it's very helpful to have tenants doing, right? And I think it starts, as we've mentioned a couple of times, with making sure they're aligned with what you as an owner or an operator are trying to do with the building. In terms of some operational things, it would be great to get visibility, across tenant consumption, and that's really ultimately kind of comes back to the communication, right? Depending on the rating that you're doing, it is possible to, and Karl probably talk a little bit more in detail about this, it is possible to exclude tenant consumption, but obviously to be able to exclude it, you first have to measure it, and you secondly have to be able to get access to it, right? So, that kind of working closely with the tenants is super important, basically to help, maximize the energy efficiency, right? And making sure that they're walking kind of in lockstep with you, right? That they understand the efficiency goals and the sustainability benefits that come with it.
Excellent, thank you. And right, if the microphone stays with you, as it were, then I think Scott, because I think now we're moving into this element of things where you're going to run us through a case study on improvements using NABERS, and then we'll come back for a last few questions. Thank you.
Yep, awesome. Hopefully, Jim, you can see my screen.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, cool.
Thank
so
you.
look, maybe just kind of a little bit, who are we? For those of you on the call that don't know about CAM, a quick intro for us. Look, we're basically a software technology company that provides kind of real-time monitoring for energy and equipment usage in buildings. We work with customers, kind of all around the world in all commercial asset classes. So, offices, shopping centers, we've kind of discussed quite a bit, but also, large commercial buildings such as airports and museums. And ultimately what we're about doing is kind of setting up an automated process to identify and diagnose these operational issues that are happening in real time on the ground, right? And to that end, we really want to enable, building owners and building operators to kind of move away from the traditional reactive style of working and ultimately, you know, we want to help people run, you know, better buildings more easily, right? How does that sort of help drive, you know, the improvement in the ratings? As we've said, you know, it's very much an impact, not intent, with NABERS, right? So for us, it's sort of three key pillars there, right? Understanding, as I said, that the where you are, that first part of the analysis. So getting access to the data, you know, using some of the tools that NABERS have on their website, reverse calculators and things like that. Analysis of and understanding, you know, where the potential optimization opportunities exist within your building, whether it's, you know, working with what you've got or whether it's, you know, extending that via capital improvements. The second part of that is the improvement, right? So again, once you've implemented those strategies, once you've done that work, basically monitoring that, making sure it is working as intended, and you want to kind of keep tuning and tweaking it, right? We've mentioned this a couple of times. You know, the annual subscription or the annual focus of NABERS really forces this to be top priority for all asset teams, right? And then ultimately what you want to get to is the final outcome, right? Improved energy efficiency, higher NABERS ratings, and you know, ultimately without compromising the day-to-day operations of the building and the tenants that you have in there, right? They're the ones who also kind of involved here, right? So just kind of going through those in a little bit more detail, right? Starting off with the analysis, this is a couple of examples of a few things that we have done with different sets of clients, jumping into, you know, scenario planning analysis, understanding what the energy is doing, how the rated area is changing, how the occupancy is changing over time, and what kind of impact that's having on the energy. You know, deep dive with some manual work into how the building control strategies are working, how the mechanical plant is running, how the lighting systems are coming on, putting forward optimization recommendations and scoring systems around that kind of thing as well, right? So what that looks like, just a very quick example, right? This is a building that we worked with. You kind of see a little bit of history there. So as I said, this is very much that analysis piece, right? Where are we starting from? This is kind of what we've been doing the past couple of years. How much room do I have to play? You know, how far away am I from my next target, right? My next half-star target. What things have to change in the building to enable me to get there, right? What we kind of do then, sort of moving into that improvement, right, is that top level down, right? So starting at the, you know, monitoring the operational performance of the building, right? As I said, I'm going to say it probably again, this is an operational rating, right? So you really need to kind of get in there and understand the operations of the building, right? And that starts at the meter level, the main building energy meter levels, going down into the sub-meter levels where that exists, whether it's tenant consumption and exclusions, and then diving even further into the individual equipment level, right? So this is looking at things such as, you know, your air handling units, your pumps, where they're doing, where that's coming in, and basically, you know, really collecting all that data, normalizing it, and then that is how you kind of drive the action, right? With the improvement, getting those root cause alerts on things that are going wrong, ultimately assigning it to who needs to kind of fix it, you know, whether it be your facility management team or your service contractors, putting it in the hands of the people who can make the change, right? And I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, right? This is really the kind of focus that we're seeing a lot of clients doing, right? Is moving away from the outdated, you know, maintenance where we have to go and stick our head above every ceiling once a month, and really kind of embracing that tech-enabled sort of data-driven maintenance, right? Where you've got a smart system monitoring your building 24/7. It's constantly looking there, and it's putting the information in the hands of the people who can go and fix it and repair it. So for us, this kind of sits across, you know, four main pillars, right? Collecting that information, as I've touched on, building that digital twin of data of your building, moving into, you know, you're utilizing AI models, right, to basically continually monitor and diagnose issues that are happening, improving, you know, again, creating the tooling to help people fix things, right? And then ultimately kind of benchmarking, right? And this is where a scheme such as NABERS is really led the way, right? Measuring properties, apples for apples, as Karl mentioned at the beginning. But what this is, you know, this is a quick example that I've got up here, a building in Brisbane, Australia. that we've kind of worked with. You know, a couple of the challenges, and this is challenges probably everyone on the call is familiar with, right? High consumption. We don't know why. We don't know where it's going. We've got people, you know, on the ground once a month having a look at things, walking around, sticking their heads above ceilings, but not really a kind of coordinated effort. You know, in terms of the stakeholder and the supply chain, there's been a bit of, you know, FM movement, a couple of different contractors kind of coming in and out of the place, and not a lot of continuity, right? But once you kind of go through that process of the collect and the, these ones here, the collect, the monitor, the improve, and the benchmark, these are the kinds of results that you can kind of see, right? So in this particular case, you know, the building was able to get a 2-star increase up 3 to 5, 28% reduction in annual energy consumption, no effect on the way the tenants are kind of able to use in the building, and kind of want to make sure that's possible, right? But all kind of facilitated by that live monitoring, right? So the, you know, all the individual sensors and pieces of equipment across the building. Extrapolating that out, you know, that was one building. Extrapolating that out across a portfolio or a suite of buildings, these are the kind of results that you can see as well, right? So this is another client that we've worked with. 71% of the properties, the 60+ offices that we've had or that we've worked with them on, basically improved their NABERS Energy ratings. Half of them have improved NABERS water ratings, and also whilst maintaining that visibility on the indoor environment, right, and that tenant experience. So I think it was mentioned at the beginning of the call, right, there is some direct financial benefits of that as well, right, and you can kind of see them there on the side. But no, look, I just wanted to share hopefully a little bit more operational insight into how these tools can basically be used to drive these efficiencies and drive these improvements, both at the single site level and across the portfolio as well. Thanks, Jim. I will stop sharing my screen.
Really nice numbers and stats and figures there for us to take on board as well. So we're now down to the last few minutes. I've got a couple of closing kind of comment opportunities for each of the panel. So I wonder if Claire, if maybe I come to you first. I wonder if just final thoughts, really. I might invite you to make a little mention of the importance of the design review panel, but also then just final words of advice from you. So closing thoughts, please, Claire.
So yeah, I think we've raised a lot of interesting points today, and I think my closing thoughts are really looking at the themes that have come up, and they've been on communication, on not so much on the technical stuff, but on the people and the teams and how we work together. So I think NABERS is a team effort, as I mentioned before, and it's great that it's an opportunity really to for the design team, for the contractors, for the owners, the tenants and the service contractors and everyone that's involved in the building to come together and work to a common goal. So I think that's a really great opportunity for the industry to not be such antagonistic, but to be collaborative. So and in terms of the design review panel, there's 11 of us, I think, at the moment, and we've all been pretty busy with design reviews, but also that's not our only role. So doing the actual work is one part of the process, but there's also a part which is educating industry and answering your questions and making sure everyone is really ready for NABERS. So I'm sure all of us on the design review panel are happy to answer any questions on NABERS and to really get NABERS up and running.
Excellent, thank you. So emphasis on it being a team game and getting away from that adversarial culture that has been way too prevalent in construction historically. So Joe, then, if I'm coming to you, you made some very nice points at the top of the show about the importance of being a benchmark that's updated, the leasing impact, cost savings. So final thoughts maybe from you, Joe, around, especially around asset management and the owners, maybe even investors' perspective. Final thoughts, Joe, please.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think the team element's really important. And when we were planning refurbishments of buildings in Australia, sometimes the operational teams were not being asked to contribute their ideas and thoughts to the design process. But actually, the way a building is used is really critical. And I think including the operational team in reviewing plans and designs and having their perspective is really important. So that's one thing, I think, including having that thought, not just as to a design rating, but also the ongoing operational rating is great. And then I think the second thing is the whole suite of NABERS ratings are really important. I think introducing NABERS Energy ratings to the UK is a great place to start, and I'm really excited about this. But I'm also excited to see what comes next. I lived in Australia for 12 years, several of those being periods of drought, and I loved the NABERS water rating. We saw great results in our buildings after introducing the NABERS water rating, where we started identifying water leaks and fixing them because we were measuring and we started to manage in that area. So NABERS Energy is exciting, but also seeing what then comes next.
Excellent. Nice points there. And you're rounding up together very nicely with linkages between design and operation. That takes us back to what we were saying, really moving from intent to impact and actually keeping promises effectively in terms of buildings and property. So Scott, I'm going to put you on the spot now for one. I'm going to ask you for one key essential to remember with NABERS before I go to Karl to finish. So Scott, what's the one key takeaway? One thing people need to remember and do maybe tomorrow morning, Monday morning. What's the essential with NABERS, please, Scott?
I think for me, the essential with NABERS is again, I'm going to say it, impact, right? Not intent. So I think I really like what Joe said there about the operational team, right? It's the people on the ground that ultimately have a huge impact in how well you know, the building is able to achieve its particular goals, right? And you really want to set them up for success, right? And however you kind of choose to do that, but enabling those teams to have the visibility and be able to drive the impact across the buildings that they're ultimately responsible for, I think is probably the best way forward.
Excellent. Nice point to finish on then. And Karl, I was just going to come to you finally in that roasting to specs, glass half full. What would success look like for NABERS in the UK? So if things go well and take up strong, give us a flavour, Karl, of what success would look like, please.
I think expansion is success. I mean, there's been a lot of activity in Australia, and I think as the office tool became quite mature in the office sector, and then we saw the desire for it in other building sectors, and that came from many sources, and particularly we've got portfolios across many building sectors, and there was that desire that you know, they can rate their buildings in offices. Let's be able to do that for shopping centres and warehouses and data centres, and yeah, so I think continually, I think that continual sort of desire and interaction with industry is key. Communication was definitely a theme today, and I think that constant communication with the stakeholders is key to having a really engaged industry and a partnership with schemes like with NABERS. So yeah, I think success is not just going into different building types, but different tools. We've got a great suite of tools, and adding to that, water. Definitely important, and water is something that's so easy to add to an energy rating, because an assessor is already collecting a lot of building information that goes into that rating, and you can collect the water information and complete a water rating as well. So they go really well together. You can build onto that with waste, and then the three of those go together nicely into a carbon neutral tool. So. And then the indoor environment tool is really interesting. It's come up a few times today, where it's kind of it doesn't have to be one or the other, energy efficiency or good indoor environment. And our data shows definitely that you can have the best of both worlds there. So that would be, yeah, it's quite exciting with NABERS being in UK, and I really look forward to seeing where it's going to go from here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So tools, not just types, good plug for communication. Nice forward-looking note, excitement in the air, no less. Right, great. Thank you. So we are bang on time. So a couple of concluding comments from me, just to place carbon reduction in context here in the UK. Obviously, we have a new government in number 10 as of last week. We have a green prosperity plan. We have a national wealth fund. And it's all as part of a commitment to make Britain what they call a clean energy superpower with zero carbon electricity by 2030. And just to set alarm bells ringing, I always comment at this point, 2030, literally today, the 11th, is only 2,000 days away. So if you're wanting to press the panic button, then 2,000 days is will really get the heart racing, I think. So, but this is the context for energy use in buildings around performance improvement, ratings reduction. This is the new policy landscape, especially here in the UK. And this is why, exactly why, it is right place, right time for NABERS UK for us. So on that note then, closing. Big thank you to all our esteemed panelists for their insights. So Karl Welsch, Joe Hawkins, Claire Bhaumik, and of course Scott Beauman and our hosts at CIM. To yourselves out there, virtual audience, working hard with joining at your desks and screens with your questions and comments. As mentioned, you'll all get the recording afterwards, and please don't forget that very quick post-event survey. It's really handy to have that kind of feedback. So that's it for today. Look forward to seeing you at the next session. Best way to follow up is keep an eye on the CIM LinkedIn page. It's always promoted on there, and of course in your email inbox. Meanwhile, that's it for today. Thank you very much, panel. I've been Jim McClelland, editor at SysMeme. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon. Thank you.